Hello again, and welcome to Open Studio, the show that keeps you in touch with the community because we are always in conversation with the community. So, today I have my guest, Ronald, who is from the Trauma Center. Now, this has been a very significant organization that has really made a lot of impact in dealing with issues around trauma and violence throughout the decades. It was through the struggle era that they made a name for themselves. And even today, in 2020, they still have a relevant spot in our daily lives and in our communities. Welcome, Ronald. How are you
Thank you so
today?
much. I'm fine. Thank you.
And thank you so much for coming to today's show. So, can you tell us a bit about the Trauma Center? Like, what is it for those that might not be aware of it?
The Trauma Center is a non governmental organization. Our main office is based in Woodstock, but we render services to the communities around the Cape Flats, areas such as Delft, Manenberg, and other areas surrounding those areas. So basically, what we do is we have three units within the organization. One is a child protection clinic, which focuses on children who experience trauma. And then the other service that we render is directed at victims of gender-based violence, which is mainly around families where a woman or a man is suffering domestic violence at home. And this form of violence, we always see that it affects children because children see it on a day-to-day basis. But we also provide a service to workplace employees. So employees who go through trauma, we engage with them to assist them to cope so that companies can focus on productivity while employees are happy. So basically, that's what we do. Most of our cases that we work on, we focus on the element of violence because social work services are rendered by many other NGOs. So our niche service is designed to assist with trauma, while other organizations give counseling for other kind of social problems that families and communities are going.
Look, it's not easy for, a group of people to come together and decide that they are going to take on, trauma, and help others heal from trauma from an individual basis right onto a community level. So to me, it sounds like this is an organization filled with superheroes. What would you say to that?
Look, we are superheroes. That's how communities look at us, and then it's quite a difficult job, I must say, because remember, throughout the day, you're taking in a lot of what people come through, whether it's a child who was raped, whether it's a woman who's going through a drastic divorce where she's been beaten on a day-to-day basis. So you are that person who always have to rub the back of that family and say everything is going to be fine. I mean, 2020 has been a difficult year with COVID-19. We have seen a lot of children lose their parents to COVID-19. So we've been doing a lot of bereavement counseling for children that lost their parents, but not only children, other family members who are suffering their loss. So as a social worker or social auxiliary workers we work with in the organization, we take in a lot, and then we always have to make sure that we take care of ourselves so that we are able to take care of our communities.
I'd really, on this episode, like to focus on the programs and the activities you are doing within the community, especially around the clinics. You have various kinds of clinics going. Um, I'd really first like to start with the mobile clinic, the one that is geared at learners or at schools. So why is there, why do you think it's necessary to have some sort of clinic, a mobile clinic at schools?
Look, it's very important, especially the Western Cape. When you look at the communities around Cape Town, there's a lot of gun violence. So children are exposed to violence at a young age. Children are exposed to joining gangs at a young age. They are exposed to substance abuse at an early age because that becomes their coping mechanism. And this manifests itself into behavioral problems. Then they don't come home on time, they sleep out, they start engaging in sexual activities at a young age to maintain their addiction to substances. They end up now breaking into houses to be able to buy a fix for a day. So it's very important that we go to them at that stage where we're able to engage them on a behavior change programs at the schools, because in most cases parents struggle to link the child's behavior with the trauma that the child has gone through in the house. And then the moment we start speaking to children, we realize that, oh, this child probably see the parents fighting every day, beating each other. And the only way that this child can cope with this is by going to have a sort of a substance to numb the pain within themselves. Or children go through rape and they don't talk about it because they cannot talk to their parents. So it's very important that when we go, it's very important to go to schools, because that's where we find out the gist of the issue. What are the issues surrounding the community? Because I mean, a school is positioned in a community for a reason, and and sometimes because children cannot speak at home, they speak better at schools, and also with the relationship with teachers. Teachers are able to identify change in a child's behavior, to say this child was performing well in the first quarter, but we're starting to see a drop in the marks. There might be something wrong, and then we follow up on those.
Okay. So, I mean, the other question I really have you, I mean, you're talking a lot about the work you are doing in schools, but the question that now, that I seem to have is, why would schools even be a place where trauma would play out in the first place? What are the underlying causes, do you think?
Remember, children spend a lot of time at school. So they leave home to go to school, and they spend a lot of time with the teachers and engaging with each other. And teachers, because they teach and spend time, they know there are things that they can look at, but because they're not social workers, they cannot deal with social problems. But they know that this child is always coming to school with bruises. This child doesn't do a homework. This child's behavior has changed from what it was at the beginning of the year to what this child is now. So it becomes a very useful platform for us for engaging with children, because this is where they spend most of their day. And this is where there is peer-to-peer support. Most children participate effectively in programs such as the ones the Trauma Center gives when they are engaging with their peers. So a school is important for, there are many other reasons, but for that is why we go to schools, because it gives us that entry point into a community.
Thank you so much, Ronald. We do have to go to an ad break. We'll catch you after these. Welcome back to Open Studio. My name is Sisanda Henda, your host, and I'm sitting here with Ronald from the Trauma Center. We're having a really engaging conversation of the work that the Trauma Center is doing in impacting our communities positively. So, Ronald, I would like to still continue around these mobile clinics for schools. You spoke a lot about, what you're doing around the learners, but I would like to know, do these clinics extend to teachers and parents, because those are the other stakeholders that are somehow connected to the schooling environment.
Thank you for asking that. Yes, we work as with different stakeholders when we go to schools. In most cases, the school governing board invites us actually to say, because we represent parents as school governing board, we know what the challenges are in the community, and the school always reports back on the challenges within the school. So the idea of going to a school is to address social ills in a safe space, which is the school. So we end up rendering service to the parents and then also to the children. And how we do it is that we will be starting what we call parenting groups in all the areas that we're working in. These parenting groups, we have identified that there are a lot of issues, especially around teenagers, adolescents, who are starting to show behavior of experimenting with substances and just doing things that parents don't understand. So we'll be having a parenting group that will try to strengthen the relationship between the teenagers and their parents, because parents only scream at their children. There's never a time where parents sit down with their children and have a conversation about their behavior, but they wait for them to make a mistake, and then it become an exchange between them, and they adolescent will just bang the door and go to their room or just go back to the street. So we're hoping that the parenting groups is going to assist parents on how to engage with their young ones, but also with children, just basic life skills of communication with their parents, how to communicate effectively with their parents, and then how to express themselves with their parents, because we find that that is one of the missing links when we work with children. But in terms of the school also, teachers struggle in classrooms and they always don't know what to do. And then they find our service very useful for them because they give us feedback on the changes they see on the child. Even though some children we don't see change, but there's a percentage where there is a change in the child's behavior, which manifests itself into improved marks, attendance on a day-to-day basis at school.
But this is not the only, group, learners, also the schooling environment is not the only, environment that you cater to. You also look at issues around gender-based violence and trauma, and you also have a clinic, especially for those sort of circumstances and situations. Would you like to tell us, briefly, in a nutshell, what it's all about?
Gender-based violence is one of the biggest challenges our country is facing. And we also know that with COVID-19, we saw a spike in the number of gender-based violence cases in the area. Interestingly enough, one of the police stations around Cape Town uh, counted, it's actually rated number one in terms of people who reported gender-based violence during COVID.
Number
And
one in Western Cape
in the
or?
country, and this police station is the Delft SAPS. And fortunately, the trauma center, we've got our clinic there where we assist victims of gender violence in Delft and surrounding areas. So this clinic really is looking at families as a whole, but it's focused mainly on the victims. So a victim at this point could be anyone. It could be um, the woman in a relationship, it could be the man, it's a same-sex relationship, both partners, but it doesn't look at it in a linear way. We're looking at violence to between partners in the household. So with that, what we do is we do preventative work where we distribute pamphlets in communities because it happens a lot, but people don't report it. But because we learn that people don't report it in most cases because they don't know where to go. But if they know that they have to go to a police station, in most cases, we find that the police officials don't know how to take a statement of a gender violence case. So we've got training that we provide to the frontline officials in police stations on how to deal with people going through a traumatic experience like gender-based violence. And that is helping us see more and more people coming to report because with this one, what we see is that there must be a trust between the victim and the service that is being rendered. So if the trauma center is going to render service to this person, first you must build trust with them. And if in most cases it's difficult for us as trauma center to start with a psychosocial support or trauma counseling with the victim if the case has not been opened with the police. So our relationship as trauma center with the police is important. So we do preventative work by educating, creating awareness, but we also respond when it happens. And then after we provide a little bit of legal advice to the victims on how to open cases, get protection orders if they need them. And some of the victims have to be removed through the assistance of the law enforcement to shelters because of the dire situations they find themselves in.
So you said that you are helping trauma centers actually training police personnel in the front line who would be attending to these gender-based violence, cases. How is that working out? What have what do the policemen that have gone through the training have they changed their perception? Do the victims find it a little more easier? Like, have you heard any feedback from both of those groups?
Look, it's quite a tricky situation, this one, because for us to end up having this program, it was based on the feedback we are getting from the victims. So victims will come to us and say, my husband beat me. I went to a police station. They came and they told us that it's a family matter. And they mediated instead of arresting. And the victim is wanting arrest, but the police now start mediating. and that is what they are role. So we have to address that. Number two, in most cases, the perpetrator, in the form of a husband or a wife or a girlfriend, boyfriend, will pay a bribe, and then the case just disappears. And then this victim has to stay with the perpetrator continuously. The sad part is also when people are raped, there is a process that has to be followed. Uh, Children have to be taken to hospital. The doctor must confirm, but we know that there must be a rape kit that's been taken immediately. And victims will be turned home being told that there is no transport to take you to hospital. Go home, don't change your panties, sleep like that, and then we'll come pick you up tomorrow. So we have to address that. So the training is focusing on those challenges we identified as trauma center in helping victims of gender-based violence. I'll say this. We are based at Delft Police Station, Langa Police Station, and other social workers in other communities. Where we are based, we see a change because we're always there to enforce some of the policies that the police have to follow. But once we have engagements with them, because they know these things, we start to see a change, and then we have a proper working relationship with the police officers, especially in the front offices. Some police stations will always tell us that now that you are here, can you assist us with screening for when people are queuing at the front, which people are coming
Yes.
to report
We
rape.
can continue this conversation after our ad break. Don't go anywhere. Do catch us after these. Welcome back to Open Studio. I am here with Ronald from the Trauma Center. So, Ronald, I rudely interrupted you during the break. We were talking about gender-based violence and the work that the Trauma Center is doing in assisting many victims, not only victims, officials that are also intertwined within the the gender-based violence issue. Would you like to continue on that point?
Yes. Let me just finish the point I was talking about. The relationship between the trauma center and the South African Police Service is very important because that is the entry point of a victim with law enforcement. And if a proper statement is not taken, then this case doesn't stand any day in court. So it's very important that a statement is well taken and the victim receive proper support in terms of trauma counseling from organizations such as the Trauma Center. Just to remind viewers at home that there are many other organizations rendering services, especially social work services, and then other organizations that render trauma services in areas that the Trauma Center doesn't reach.
Okay. So gender based violence is usually a part of the issue. It's usually found in a specific kind of community. It kind of has, wherever you find high rates of gender based violence, it's a certain type of community. Am I right in saying that you will find such instances?
I think when it comes to gender-based violence is everywhere. When we look at what research tells us, it happens everywhere. The problem is how it's reported and which one is reported. And then we find that in our communities where there's lots of violence and substance abuse, that is under a microscope, like the Cape Flats. We know that we see reports of gang violence. Most people there are members of gangs, and they survive on substances just to numb the pain and the fear and everything, so that they can take out a gun and fight with each other. And these are their fathers and brothers who still go back home. And now, because they are still high, they are still having a rush of what was happening on the street. They also take out the anger on their partners. They take out the anger on their children. So that is reported on. But also we see the other side of it, where in the affluent areas where we don't see people on the streets, gates are locked, high walls, it still happens. And it comes only when people are saying, I am tired of this, I want a divorce. And when they come to us, they say, I've been living like this for the past 20 years. So it doesn't discriminate. It happens
All right. Okay. Well, can we also talk about, trauma on a community level? You briefly mentioned gang violence, and because gangsterism affects, it's a negative, affects communities, many communities negatively. Would you like to speak more about that and the work that the trauma center is doing in, kind of assisting to lower the levels or things like that?
So what we see a lot as a trauma center in the areas that we work in is the level of crime is going up, in a sense that because now we've got a lot of gangs that are now emerging and we've got the existing ones, we're starting to see now them fighting for turfs a lot. And now, because it's no longer about substances, they are introducing new things. And you'll see the SAPS is now talking about extortion, which in other form they call it paying protection fee. And this affects who? It affects people who own early childhood development centers in communities, people who've got backyard dwellers in their premises, tuck shop owners in communities. And this also affects people who are waiters in restaurants who get dropped in communities at night. Few requests that I got this week are about a taxi that was stopped at night, and then a gang of men pull gun on all the people in the combi from work, and then ask for their cell phones and their money, and they go. So you can imagine the trauma these people go through, and then having to use the same route, be in a taxi every day. Because when you deal with trauma, the triggers are very important. We focus on the triggers. What triggers what happened to you when you go through a counseling with a person? They will always say the fact that I'm going to still use the same route, the same bus stop we dropped the person where we were robbed, we still have to stop there and drop this person. We get scared when that happens. So, I mean, the criminal element of it is what seems to increase the number of trauma cases we deal with, but it's all linked to gang violence, substance abuse, and then manifests itself into gender-based violence. But all of them, they leave our communities in a traumatic experience.
So now another area or another environment where where trauma does play out is the workplace. Why would it even play out in an in a space like that?
So workspaces are very crucial because a company, especially private companies, are about making profit. And when they make profit, it means employees must be productive. And the human resource department now start getting so big, so overwhelmed with dealing with social problems, and that's not their role. So social problems then end up being the role of organizations like the trauma center, and we call this workplace wellness. So what happens to an employee at home is going to affect them at home, at work. And then companies want their employees to be happy. And then for their employees to be happy, they have to strengthen and develop proper strategies on how to deal with the wellness of their employees. And that is what we do at the trauma center. So we provide a confidential service to employees in the workplace where people can talk about challenges within the workplace and then also about the challenges at home. So the service is not only for the employee, it's for the employee with their immediate family members. People get dropped on their way to work. So the manager doesn't have to deal with that. I will be there as a social worker from trauma center to do trauma counseling for the client and make sure that we develop positive coping mechanism, and then we make sure that the person now is becoming productive again in the workplace. But people lose family members to death, COVID-19 and many other things. So we are there on standby all the time to make sure we take care of that. But there are also people who don't come to work on Mondays because we know what they do on Sunday. They go a little bit overboard with the drinks and then they cannot sleep. So on Mondays, they're not productive and they cannot perform. Instead of a supervisor dealing with that, then the social worker will try to study the behavior of the child outside the work, of the employee outside the work, and then try to help them develop positive behavior that will make them
That's what it's
productive
all
at work.
about. Yes.
Yes, yes.
Thank you so much, Ronald. We are at the end of our show today. And thank you to you, the viewer, as well, for joining us on another amazing episode of Open Studio. Thank you and goodbye.